So I actually forgot I had these, but here's the original cover, if you can see that. Then I also have the variant with the Spot, who is the villain. That's like another cover. And then I also, for the same exact issue, have the Westworld variant cover. This is like an extremely limited edition one as well, apparently. And I have it, and I completely forgot. Looks good, I think. Can you guys see that? What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another Ultimate Spider-Man review. My name is Cameron and this is the review for Ultimate Spider-Man issue 111, which is the issue that's been highly anticipated, where Peter Parker and Aunt May have the secret identity Spider-Man talk. Now, if any of you guys don't remember, of course, Aunt May actually found out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man during the Clone Saga, and basically what happened is everything got so crazy that Peter had no other choice but to explain to Aunt May that he's Spider-Man. And so we've had the Clone Saga, we've had the Ultimate Night Saga, Aunt May has been recovering in hospital, and now it's time for Aunt May and Peter to have that talk about like explaining why he's Spider-Man, how long he's been Spider-Man, and all of that really cool, interesting stuff. It's also important to point out that this is the issue where Mark Bagley, the artist, leaves the comic forever. So Mark Bagley will no longer be doing the artwork and the drawings and everything. Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley actually broke a world record for having the longest run with the same writer and artist on the same series. So for example, I think the previous ones was Jack Kirby and Stan Lee on the Fantastic Four comics, but obviously Mark Bagley is leaving the comics, so that is where the world record stands as far as I'm aware. It's still 111. Some interesting facts for you there. But what happened in the previous issue with Ultimate Spider-Man issue 110? Well, we saw Moon Knight get executed at the very beginning of the comic in what was probably the most brutal way possible. He literally got blasted in the face. It was just awful, like dark and gruesome. If you remember as well, we also had Iron Fist, who betrayed all of the other heroes to the Kingpin, and Iron Fist, to make up for all of that, went back to Kingpin and distracted him whilst Daredevil snuck into the room and began to threaten Kingpin's sick wife Vanessa to the point where he was legitimately going to murder her. Like, Daredevil literally got pushed to the edge in that. That was so bad. And leading on from that came one of the best moments in the Ultimate Night Saga, which is where Spider-Man actually had to talk Daredevil out of killing Vanessa and sort of teach him what it means to be a superhero. It was just so awesome for Spider-Man as a 15-year-old kid to be able to teach someone like Daredevil, who's a lot older than him, what it means to be a hero. Like, you don't really get moments in comic books like that anymore to that extent. It was just so good. And of course, to close the issue off, we had Kingpin being arrested, wanting to blow up Peter Parker's high school. That was like super Kingpin, like his rage level was like up here. But as we turn to the final page, we could see Peter Parker and all of the other heroes not really winning anything. They all pretty much lost something. So Peter obviously had to be reminded that at the end of the day, Kingpin still won. He owns the rights to the Spider-Man character. Iron Fist betraying the other heroes, Daredevil's secret identity being out there, and all that stuff. So yeah, that is where the issue left off with the finale to the Ultimate Night Saga. It was so dark and probably one of the most realistic and more adult sagas of the Ultimate Spider-Man series. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. But now it's time to jump into this one. Isn't really like part of any saga, it's just like titled The Talk. So it's time Aunt May and Peter had this Spider-Man talk. So let's get into it. Man, it's so good to be reviewing this issue finally. Aunt May knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and as we get through the issue, you guys are going to begin to feel like there is a weight being lifted off your shoulders as Peter begins to go through all of the details as to what it took to be Spider-Man whilst maintaining the secret identity from Aunt May. And what's great about that is that it shows just how much you are truly invested in this Ultimate Spider-Man series in Peter Parker's character, because you are literally feeling like you are carrying the weight of his secret identity on your shoulders as well. So getting into the issue, and basically what's happening on screen right now, Peter is explaining to Aunt May how long he's been Spider-Man, how he became Spider-Man, all of that crazy stuff. And what's really great is that as we've been going through this series, Aunt May has sort of been dealing with her own problems, wondering why Spider-Man is like so close to her life and all this crazy stuff, and now it all makes sense. And you sort of get like a little bit of relief as Aunt May is finding this out, because she also begins to realize that it's not actually a coincidence that Spider-Man lives in Queens, also goes to the same school as Peter Parker, was there on the night that Uncle Ben's killer was caught, and it's just really great because all of these loose ends are actually starting to connect to each other and make sense, and you feel like Aunt May is getting the closure that she's wanted pretty much the entire Ultimate Spider-Man series. Now, I feel like the comic did a really good job of putting across the guilt that Peter Parker feels for Uncle Ben's death to Aunt May. Like, you can tell that Aunt May really does see it that Peter Parker blames himself for this situation. I just love the awkward silence that sort of follows that, because it is a really touching subject for a 15-year-old kid to feel the responsibility of his Uncle Ben's death. And something else to point out as well, I actually do believe that this is how the conversation would go if Peter and Aunt May actually had a conversation about the secret identity of Spider-Man. Like, it's a realistic direction for the conversation as to how these two characters would actually talk about it. You know, like how Aunt May is sort of asking a load of questions, she doesn't like the violence of Spider-Man fighting people, and of course she has those worrying tendencies for Peter, knowing that he's going out there every single day fighting villains and bad guys, etc. But it's also got that perspective of interest coming from Aunt May at the same time. She wants to know how he became Spider-Man, why Norman Osborn is in their lives so much, what he was doing today as Spider-Man, etc, etc. It's just a really believable direction for their conversation. So I feel like Brian Michael Bendis, the writer, did a job well done on that. I was also quite fond of how we were revisiting past events. So for example, Peter actually mentioned that Mary Jane got thrown off a bridge by Norman Osborn, and that is one of the many reasons as to why he wouldn't tell Aunt May, because it would put Aunt May in those situations as well. And again, what I'm looking forward to is, now that Aunt May knows the whole thing with Norman Osborn and Harry Osborn and all that crazy stuff, Aunt May can actually be in on like the gossip and know why Peter doesn't want to hang out with certain people, because now he can just straight up tell them that like they're a bad guy, like, you know what I mean? But going into more of the interest that Aunt May is showing, she even wants to know how he finds crimes and stuff like that as Spider-Man, and I think that's a really interesting topic to discuss, because as a Spider-Man fan, I don't really think I would think to ask that. But going into what's happening on screen, you can see that we are finally introduced to the supervillain known as the Spot, but this is the Ultimate Universe's version. So if any of you guys don't know who this character is, his name is Jonathan Own or On, or like, I can't really pronounce it exactly, but basically one day he created a portal and it created a power outage in the city, and with him thinking that this was his one-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go through a black hole, he stepped into that and then woke up in a different dimension. Eventually, when he found the black hole that took him there in the first place, he came back to the real world and he pretty much looked like this. He had chalk skin, he had black portals all over his body, and he decided to pretty much become the supervillain known as the Spot. So from the interaction that Spider-Man had with this character, this comic is also reintroducing the Roxxon company again, and we've had this company pop up a lot of times during this Ultimate Spider-Man series, so it's definitely obvious that they're dealing in some shady business, especially because every single time Spider-Man comes up against someone like this, whether it be Silver Sable or the Vulture, etc, Roxxon is always involved. But as we're getting further into the issue, it becomes more obvious that Aunt May doesn't like hearing about Spider-Man fighting criminals or anybody for that matter, because obviously now she knows it's Peter Parker, and that's going to be something that Aunt May is going to have to put up with every single day for the rest of her life. And Aunt May even brings up an interesting point of seeing Spider-Man on the news all the time and stuff. I mean, that's going to be a weight on Aunt May's shoulders now. And speaking of a weight on Aunt May's shoulders, she now has to protect his secret identity as well. In other words, it's going to be a change of lifestyle for Aunt May. She's going to have to start lying for Peter Parker, and obviously, as Aunt May says right here, she doesn't like being dishonest, but that's something that she's going to have to get used to, and that is one of the burdens that comes with knowing the secret identity of Spider-Man. So already, without even doing anything, Aunt May is already being dragged into Spider-Man's world for the negative side of things, like having to lie about certain stuff, but she knows he's Spider-Man now, so who cares about that? Something else I liked about the issue was how they rounded off Peter and Aunt May's discussion, with Aunt May fully accepting that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, wanting him to stay there and live there and grow up, and she doesn't want to miss a second of it. And again, it's almost like you're getting this weight lifted off your shoulders along with Peter Parker, because now he doesn't have to worry about coming home late or lying about like why he's not been in school or anything like that. And I think that's a really important thing, because throughout the entire Ultimate Spider-Man series, all of these 111 issues, news, the whole thing about keeping the secret identity from Aunt May has almost been like a paranoia as you've been reading every single issue, and now it's all out in the open and you can sort of relax a little bit. Like Peter could literally just walk in through the front door in his Spider-Man costume and Aunt May wouldn't bat an eyelid now. Like, that is so awesome. So yeah, that is where the issue rounds off, but before we completely finish it, there's actually a page in the back with a little bit of a letter from Mark Bagley, the artist on the Ultimate Spider-Man series himself. Obviously, I've already mentioned that he's leaving the Ultimate Spider-Man comic in this issue, so the next issue isn't going to be drawn by Mark Bagley. The artwork's going to change and it's actually going to be taken over by Stuart Immonen. Now, in my opinion, Stuart Immonen's artwork is actually really good. I can't remember whether I really like his Spider-Man artwork or whether it was his Peter Parker artwork. I completely forget, but either way, his artwork is up there nonetheless. Now, in my opinion, Mark Bagley is my all-time favorite artist, so nothing will beat him except for Sarah Pichelli in the Miles Morales comics. But I'd like to hear what you think about his artwork in this comic, and then obviously we can give our further opinion as we continue this series. So yeah, that is it for this issue, guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this review. Let's go back on camera and talk about the highlights in further detail. Okay, so not really a super normal Ultimate Spider-Man issue. It sort of reminded me about Ultimate Spider-Man issue 13, where Peter revealed his identity to Mary Jane. That entire issue literally took place in Peter Parker's bedroom, and that is sort of similar to what happened in this issue. The entire issue took place in the kitchen of their house. Like, nothing really happened. The only action we saw was like a flashback to what happened to Peter earlier that day with the Spot villain. So Brian Michael Bendis is really good at sort of keeping a conversation interesting within one location. Like, Peter and Aunt May were just sat at the table the entire issue, pretty much. And I think that says a lot for Brian Michael Bendis' writing. It was great. But as for the actual issue and what happened in it, I was really fond of how fast Aunt May and Peter Parker got to talking about the secret identity in Spider-Man and everything, because one of the worst things is like when you've been looking forward to something for so long and then the main plot point of the comic doesn't happen until the end. So I really liked it how basically on the second page Aunt May was like, okay, we've got stuff to talk about, and it just sort of threw you right into that thing that you wanted to read the comic for. So I really liked that. I think the comic also made it clear what kind of concerns Aunt May would be having with Peter being Spider-Man. So for example, she's going to be seeing Peter on the news almost every single day. I mean, he's Spider-Man. Every single time he's Spider-Man, he's going to be putting himself in danger. He's going to be fighting criminals and potentially supervillains. There's going to be a constant worry on Aunt May's mind all of the time. And that's not going to be easy, but that's going to be something that she's got to accept, because as Peter Parker made clear, he feels responsible for the death of Uncle Ben, and with great power comes great responsibility. And I thought Aunt May, the way she sort of gave closure to Peter Parker, because for the last 100 and odd issues, Peter's been feeling guilty, and now Aunt May and Peter can kind of share that guilt in a way. Like, it doesn't have to be all on Peter Parker's shoulders. So she sort of takes that weight off him, and it's just really refreshing, especially as a reader. As I said in the review, you almost feel like Peter getting that weight off his shoulders also takes it off your shoulders as the reader as well. And that just shows how much you relate and sort of invest yourself into Peter Parker's character in this series. Like, I've never experienced anything like it. Like, Ultimate Spider-Man is like the #1 series for me personally, so it means a lot. We did have the introduction of the Spot villain, and of course I explained his origin and everything during the review, but I thought he was such an interesting villain to use for this comic because we haven't really met him as a villain in the Ultimate Universe yet. He's not a throwaway villain, but he doesn't really have a place in the Ultimate Universe as of yet. I feel like Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley used him in the correct way, because this is obviously like a one-off issue. Like, this issue isn't part of any saga necessarily, so to have a villain like him who's interesting enough to us, like, he's not just some villain we've already met before in the Ultimate Universe, it's a completely brand new villain, and they kept it short and sweet. He was used for this issue, and if I remember, I don't really think we see him again ever in the Ultimate Spider-Man series, so I feel like he was utilised to his full potential for the specific purpose of this issue, and I liked that a lot. But of course, before we rate the issue, guys, I thought this issue rounded off really nicely. Peter and Aunt May actually coming to terms with each other's sort of flaws and what they've been going through all year with the Uncle Ben death and everything. So it's nice that it rounded off the way it did. Peter is still going to be living at Aunt May's house. Obviously, it's going to get a hell of a lot more interesting. I mean, Aunt May actually knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, so Peter could literally just walk in at like 5 AM and Aunt May would be like, oh, it's okay. Whereas she used to actually be annoyed at him for being late and like not going to school and stuff, but now she understands exactly why that is. So it's going to open so many doors and get Peter off the hook a little bit. But again, before we finish, we cannot forget that Mark Bagley is leaving the comic. If you noticed, all of the pages and panels that involved Aunt May and Peter Parker sat at the table were Mark Bagley's artwork. The artwork that was Stuart Immonen, who is taking over for Mark Bagley, was all of the Spider-Man action, like when he was fighting the Spot and all of that other stuff. So you sort of get like a nice mix and blend between Mark Bagley and then who's taking over Mark Bagley. Stuart Immonen's artwork is actually quite good. I really like his Spider-Man stuff, or it's the other way around and I like his Peter Parker stuff and I don't like his Spider-Man stuff. I can't remember. Anyway, that is it for this issue, guys. I'm going to give this issue an 8 out of 10. Of course, I've already mentioned all the awesome points of where it took place in one location, but it still kept it interesting. I thought that was awesome. We've got the artwork with the mix of the two artists, and then the villain of the Spot. Fantastic, utilized really well, and I hope you guys think so as well. That is it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you want more videos on Ultimate Spider-Man and Spider-Man PS4 and all these other comic book reviews, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on this video. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. You can stay up to date on all the Spider-Man PS4 news and of course my Ultimate Spider-Man reviews, etc, etc. And I'll see you all in my next video. Goodbye.
Playing with the word now, Hollywood geeking. It's just another Hollywood weekend.